Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Last Best Hope for Conversation, your Babylon 5 podcast. We are talking acts of sacrifice today, and joining me in the CNC is Karen.
Hello, everyone.
And Lou.
The same. Hello, everyone.
And this episode, Jakar asked Sheridan to lend for help from their governments in the Narn-Centauri War, which the Narn are losing. Ivanova shows a representative from a new species around the station. This originally was released on February 22nd, 1995. It is the 12th episode of the second season, and I think this is an interesting one. A very strong A plot, and the B plot, depending on your mood, is either really strong or odd. So let's start with you, Karen. Quick thoughts.
A plot. I thought the acting was superb. I like that it's kind of advancing that Centauri versus Narn issue. And, it's just really, it's making my mind reel seeing these two, Jakar and Londo, how things are shaking out for them. B plot, weird. I don't think it really tied in to the A plot. I mean, I couldn't find any kind of a tie-in. And I guess it gave Claudia something fun to do. So yeah, I mean, that's about all I have to say about the second plot. Although I will say I love seeing Paul Williams in anything.
Yeah, I was happy to see Paul Williams, and I think he did a really good job. I'm curious. That'll be fun to talk about. Lou, how about you?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. Both plot lines, and it's the only nitpick thing I would have liked to seen is Paul Williams without so much makeup on. But you recognize him because of his voice and his stature, obviously. But I quite enjoyed the concept of that race and their particular view on things, which we'll get into when we talk about the B storyline and the A storyline. Or it was kind of like A1 and A2 is because you've got the Jakar perspective and you've got the Londo perspective. I really enjoyed that as well. And it's like Karen said, it's very interesting to see how the show continues to make us do a 180 flip on our feelings about these two characters. And I think they tried to make us feel a little sorry for Londo with this episode, but that didn't work for me. So, but it's still a good try. It's not. I don't think the execution was bad, but the things that he's done are pretty horrific. So, or the things that he set into motion are pretty horrific. And it's kind of like that argument in Star Wars that I just never understand, is where people feel that because Darth Vader threw the Emperor over the side, that redeems him for all the other things they did, which just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Okay, this will make for an interesting discussion. All right, so let's do the B plot first. There is a race that basically takes the Prime Directive to the extreme. They believe that all races are inferior to them, and they talk about that you can't interfere and you can't help them. It is truly, you have to rise yourself up on your own bootstraps, which I think is the little bit of the connection, is that both the Earth government and the Minbari government both do not interfere with the Centauri and the Narn War, is the slight connection, right? I
Mhm.
agree, not a very strong
Okay.
one, but a little bit of that.
It's
And
a reach, but yeah, I get it.
yeah.
It's not a reach on your part. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Sheridan is continuing to try to help Susan grow as a leader, and I think this makes a lot of sense why he gives this. And the whole idea is this race supposedly is a really good ally Earth needs, and so she has to show him around, and she has to put up with his superiority. And in fact, he is so superior that he will not even talk to someone. He has to have his voice like an interpreter, which is the Paul Williams character, which does give us a very funny when she's meeting him and she keeps, okay, yeah, but who are you? So Lou, let's start with you. What do you think of this little storyline? And then we'll get to the way Claudia ended up getting out of a awkward situation.
I I really liked their perspective on the things that we've taken for granted in Babylon 5. Like we've excuse me, we've talked a lot about the down under and that, and how weird that whole scenario is. Yet when the Illuminati, or I always want to say Illuminati, but it's Lumati, I guess, they look at it as a great way to get rid of the lower class or lower viable portions of Earth society and that. And in a peculiar way, it is it is true. That is what's happening. It may not be the intention, but the end result is exactly what the Lumati are their analysis is pointing to. And I found that I thought that was quite clever. And so I really liked that perspective on things, as well as but it led to the problem that I had with this episode, because now they're going to take that back and implement that policy, or whatever they would call it, into their society. So inadvertently, Susan's is going to cause a lot of grief for a certain segment of this Illuminati population. But the show just glosses over that, which is too bad, because that was something that they should have pursued. So it's interesting that this race is so like prime directive focused, but yet they themselves have become contaminated by their analysis of what they've seen on Babylon 5. So I actually really enjoyed the social commentary aspect of this particular thread, and it was Paul Williams was good. The other actor, Ian Abercrombie, who the name sounds familiar, and I'm sure if I looked at him without his makeup on, I'd say, "Oh, I've seen that guy in other things." I thought their interplay was quite well done, and I actually quite enjoyed it. And Claudia Christian got to stretch herself a bit. It's always fun to take her out of her command, the CNC element, and put her in these situations. I suspect this is something that must have, in the writers' room, sort of developed organically as they saw what happened when they put her in these kind of situations, because we've seen this happen a couple of times now. So I quite enjoyed it from that perspective as well.
Yeah, looks like this Eon has done a lot of voice work. I look at the face. I'm looking at IMDb. He does seem, that guy, one of those, right? So, Karen, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, okay. You kind of made me like that storyline a little more, Lou, because I forgot that it actually does something for me in particular. They explain the lurkers. And so that, for me, it gave me a nice perspective on, what's going on down there. And I understand it a lot better. I mean, it's stuff that we suspected already, right? That, they just came there for something and it didn't pan out, and so they're stuck there. But it was nice to see her actually outline it. I love Paul Williams in anything. And if you guys don't know who he is, look him up, because, dude, he's been all over your life. I mean, he wrote The Rainbow Connection. He wrote songs for this A Star Is Born. So I mean, he's all over the place. He also wrote the theme to The Love Boat, and I love him. Whenever I see him, he was on an episode of Community as well, which every time I see him, I'm just delighted. So
Phantom of the Paradise is where I remember.
Oh, okay, cool.
Great movie.
Yeah.
Smokey and the Bandit.
Smokey and the Bandits. All three Smokey and the Bandits.
Yeah. There is on Prime Video, Paul Williams Still Alive, which was a documentary that is very well done. He wrote You Only Just Begun, and then I think he'll forever known as The Rainbow Connection.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
It is and the documentary is really well done. He is definitely one incredibly creative person that when you look at the music he's done is just kind of wow.
It's crazy, yeah. And the fact that he's been an actor for his whole career as well. I mean, he's he's kind of like a Renaissance pixie.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, I think that storyline was very interesting. I mean, I didn't think it was horrible. I just thought it was interesting, and also made me a bit uncomfortable there at the end with the When Harry Met Sally moment.
Yes.
For Claudia Christian. It was very weird, and I'm guessing that it was kind of a wink and a nod to her when Tech shakes her hand at the end, like, I see what you did there. I mean, I'm assuming he kind of gets that she was putting on a show.
Yes, I think that is definitely
he was attracted to her because of what
could be. Yeah.
I think he was rolling his eyes like, yeah, I got to put up with this guy all the time.
Right.
So thank you for putting up with this.
Right. So he's just saying kind of he gets it, I guess. Yeah. I appreciated this. I took it as more of a almost racist thing other than a Prime Directive thing.
Yes.
Maybe both, I guess. And they're even racist among themselves, which is something that we definitely understand here on our planet currently.
Yes.
And we also get to see a little bit more of the a-hole Franklin as well.
Yes.
So yeah, it had a little bit of everything.
Yeah. So when we get to feedback, our one of our favorite contributors, Texas en la Shock, has thoughts about this episode, and mostly about a lot about the Prime Directive, which I will candidly say, I did not put the two together till I read her email, and I've seen this episode multiple times. It did not connect with me that this is the Prime Directive on steroids. And I think it was really well done as well. And we do get the lurkers. We do find out, oh, hey, this is going on. So they decide that, hey, you know what? You're worthy. And the way we do something is once we reach an agreement, we have sex. So, hey, let's have sex. And Claudia, and by the way, JMS said that she had reached out to him saying, I wouldn't mind more comedy. And so he thought of this as a way just to give her some fun. She very cleverly manipulates this guy to want to have sex the human way, quote unquote, versus his way. And then, of course, since he won't admit he doesn't know what that is, she gets to be just crazy. 3 bags full. So, Lou, Karen, whichever one of you wants to go first, let's talk about sealing the deal with a little bit of booty making.
So I read a little bit up on this, and it actually has been a custom in many cultures throughout history. apparently starting with the Egyptians. So it's not incredibly far-fetched, but it's definitely strange. I mean, I don't understand why that would cement something. I'm giving it, an excuse to have sex, I guess.
Kind of the way that marriages did,
Sure.
Kind of treaties.
An alliance, yeah.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, I understand marriages more because that they're actually uniting two families. And this is just having sex and then walking away afterwards.
Yeah.
And also, it didn't matter the gender of the person. So if it was a guy, they had sex anyway.
Yeah.
And
well, you know what they say about being bisexual. It doubles your chances of getting a date.
Exactly. I mean, I am definitely not against it. I'm just saying, I don't think Bruce would have been into that.
No.
So much.
Well, politics makes for strange bedfellows.
Truth.
Here we go.
Truth. Literally. So yeah. Very cool.
Lou?
Yeah, I just took it as they were. I don't know if this was predates or was after Sleepless in Seattle. I just thought it was kind of a chance for her to give her big. I just was waiting for Paul Williams to say, "I'll have whatever she's having" or something like that.
There you go.
Maybe that's what he was doing.
That would have been great.
Yeah. So it was good, and she got to do her comedy shop stuff. So I just took it. I know in this highly much more sensitive and elevated awareness state that we are in now, that some people would probably look at this with distaste, but sometimes a joke is just a joke, and I don't think any harm was meant in this scene. I thought it was just it's just a funny situation, and I'm sure that in diplomatic negotiations and relationships, things like this happen all the time because their two cultures don't totally understand one another, and so it's just an inadvertent thing that happens because of a lack of communication or whatever. So I thought it was funny, and I thought Claudia played the scene well, and like we've said several times now, Paul Williams' reaction to it was like the cherry on the top. So I thought it was really well done.
Yep.
Yeah, and I also think it was a nice kind of, as you're talking about cherry on top, him sending that gift, whatever that was, and saying next time our way, or my way, which is kind of and she's kind of what? And well, I'll tell you later, Captain.
Yeah, the only thing about that scene was, how did Sheridan know there was any sort of sexual implication with that unless she told him? And she specifically did not want to tell him about that. So why would he look at that wind chime and get like in her face about it? Like I really didn't get that moment. So
yeah, I'd have to look again. Maybe he was just confused. So
no, I think they were just trying to riff off of her scene, but story-wise, he wouldn't be aware of that unless Franklin. Damn that Franklin told him.
Could be, yeah. Who knows?
So going to the other A1 and A2, or we see G'Kar at senior staff, and I'm gonna stick with that. That's why Franklin is there, is he's part of senior staff.
Yeah, that's fine.
Stick with that. Basically asking for help, that the war is going poorly, and that if Earth would help at all, maybe they could get the Centauri to the bargaining table and maybe stop this. Sheridan says, I'll do what I can. And unfortunately, he knows, you could just tell the way Brute Boxleiter plays it, that he's not going to be able to do much, but he's going to try. We get one of my favorite character actors, Glenn
Morshower,
playing in the long role. By the way, he was at a convention I was at, and my buddy Tom drew a sketch of him in a pink bathrobe going to his closet, and the closet was filled with military uniforms of all the different shows he had been on.
That's his deal.
And him saying, what do I want to wear? And when Glenn signed it, he said, "How did you know pink is my favorite color?" And signed it. So
That's awesome.
it was one of my, just one of those wonderful that, at a convention just are a great moment.
Yeah,
All right.
it's really great to see all the special good actors they're getting for like these sort of cameo roles this season.
Yeah.
Something that we didn't see in the first season.
Yeah.
So then Jakar goes to Delenn, asks for the same things. They can't help him. So let's go up to that point, and then we'll talk about Londo later. But Jakar needs help. The best they can do, and I love how he talks about that. A few scraps of food, maybe some pulling people out. That's all you can do. So, Lou, let's start with you.
Well, how can we not parallel this to real world events that are going on right now?
The Ukraine.
It's impossible.
It's just right there.
It's right there. We know what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. It's a win in our column that in the real world we are helping more and more as this conflict goes on, where it'll be interesting to see if in Babylon 5 it parallels that as well, because this conflict is relatively brand new, so people are obviously stepping back and taking a hands-off approach to it until things play out a bit further, and then they see what the implications of the war are. I understood, like, the Earth position didn't surprise me. I was a little more perplexed by Delenn's reaction than I was Earth's. So, because she was telling Jakar that, how do we know that if if this conflict ends, that in the next one that you don't do the same thing or whatever. So, but that kind of thinking is, like, you can't deal with what ifs. You have to look at what's happening. And so I didn't really like her position, but it's another way of sort of doing what Earth is doing, but she's looking at it from a different, like from a Minbari perspective, I guess you could say, because that's a pretty abstract way to look at a real world situation in my mind. So I was perplexed with her reaction or response, but it was good because it sets up this is a universe where you're going to see these differing viewpoints. So I appreciated it from that perspective, and it just, the net effect is that you just really feel bad for Jakar. And when we talk about him, he has a response at the end of the episode that I want to talk about, that I found curious. So this episode was really good from a Jakar perspective, and that there's that other storyline where he's dealing with his own people as well. So yeah, I did like those two scenes. And it's just weird as we're recording this how relevant it is to today's world situation.
Yeah, and I don't know, I'm not on top of Canadian politics, but the US, there is a lot of politicians who are saying we should not be involved in this, that we should not be sending stuff to the Ukraine. And unfortunately to me, and I skip ahead a couple of minutes if you don't like politics, listeners, the people who are saying that because of their other actions, I tend to not want to give them credence because of all the other stuff they're doing. Though if I try to distance from their politics, I think you can make it up for, like, is this going to be a Vietnam? Is this something that we need to get involved in? And I think it's the right thing to do. And so, but I understand the other side. My thought was, well, Karen, you talk, and then I'll give my thoughts on Luz.
You could talk first if you want. Go for it.
I thought that was an interesting way for her to say no, is that Jakar, your previous actions have shown that any chance you had to wipe out the Centauri, you would. And now that it is changed where you're the one that's being beaten up, being attacked, you want help. But I have no doubt that if the things were reversed, you would show no sympathy. You would show no mercy. So therefore, I'm just gonna, if I help you, I am going to lead us to, you will bring us into another war, and we're just going to be stuck in a cycle of you two hurting each other. So I was okay with that.
I just want to add, sorry, Judge, because
no, please.
I forgot to mention that. My response to Delenn would have been, well, how do you know that your Great Council is not going to decide to go to war with Earth again, and you're going to do the same thing again? Like that, that argument just doesn't hold water to me. But all right. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Karen?
I forgot.
Yeah.
No, I leave that. No, I agree.
And I think sometimes we're so close to something that we don't see it's a parallel. And I think that might be part of her thinking in that.
Mm-hmm.
I also know, one of the things in the back of my head when I was watching this is that she has just been stripped of her importance in the Minbari society. And she's still kind of smarting, and she doesn't think she could do anything to help him. I mean, she won't be listened to. So I think it's a combination of things. I think there is that kind of.
That's a good point. Yeah.
We can't let this happen. We can't get involved in this because who knows what's going to happen down the line. And that was kind of a theme in this episode was, well, who started it? Well, we can go back 1,000 years, if you're saying who started it. And, there's lots of he started it, she started it things in this. And you could make a case for the fact that, Londo started this whole thing because the Narn had attacked them a couple times. So, I mean, there's a whole sticky mess between these two races, and it's like they're just not going to put down their arms. And now that the Centauri have the upper hand, and they really have the upper hand with the shadows or whatever, Jakar is definitely smarting from that. I mean, and I said smarting a million times already, but I mean, he's feeling it. And there's a lot of woe is me, but there's also a lot of, we might get exterminated. And I think in the small scale, like the stuff that's happening on Babylon 5, he's having a really hard time dealing with that. It's like a blow to his heart that they're doing it right in front of him. They're not listening to him. And in the bigger scale, he feels powerless. So he is definitely not in a good place. And we will talk about that last scene in a minute. I definitely want to save a space for that.
Yeah.
But I literally just feel awful for Jakar in this episode. And it's been getting that way more and more with each episode. There is a tinge of, I'm starting to feel a little sad for Londo, but he made his own bed. And the thing that really got me was and we've talked about this before too, is Londo's relationship with Garibaldi, that they were kind of frenemies. And Garibaldi he doesn't have any sympathy for him right now. He's glad he got paid back, and he was like, okay, I'll take this and go, because I know what you're up to. And he doesn't like it. Garibaldi definitely has an opinion, and it's not laying on Londo's side. And that, that scene where they're in the bar talking, and Londo says, why are you afraid of me? Or why should people be afraid of me? And Garibaldi says, yeah, maybe we should be afraid of you. I mean, that really says a lot, because he's not afraid of Londo. He definitely is not. But he's worried that, if he says things the wrong way, that maybe the Centauri will attack them. So, I mean, there's a lot of implication there.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit more about that, and then we'll go to Londo. Andreas Casalewis um, had a career of playing tough guys and other, it is not like he had a stellar resume. And he just is killing it.
Yep.
He is just slaying it.
He was almost exclusively playing the heavy and everything. And to see him stretch in this was amazing.
Yeah, and that great scenes, right? Like he has to get control of his people,
Mm-hmm.
And that they have no respect for him. You're just the old man, and him to be poisoned with a knife and has to, rise up from his, sick bed to go push this on. And he's so excited that they want to meet with him. And he's like, see, Natoth, by taking the high road, this is going to work out for us. And then he is grateful. I love how he plays that. No, I realize what you guys are doing. You are taking great risks to get us food and to get people out, but it just isn't gonna matter. And him laughing and crying at the same time is just brilliant. I don't find it overacting. I don't find it over dramatic. If I don't laugh, I'll cry. You know that phrase? Mm-hmm. So, Lou, you had said you wanted to talk about that. Let's get your thought, then we'll get Karen back in it.
Yeah, I think this is his acting tour de force episode so far in the series, and he just displayed a range of emotions and subtext in his acting here that really surprised me. The character of G'Kar has been one note, a hot-headed character, but in this episode he has the wherewithal to control his revenge and take the high road to accomplish a goal, sacrificing his own personal, though you could argue racial, vendetta against the Centauri in order to help everybody else that's at war, instead of just responding to his emotional outbursts. So I just think that showed a lot of depth to that character that I didn't previously was aware that existed. So I really like that. And his pleas, as we discussed in the previous discussion with Sheridan and Delenn, his reactions to their responses, like he's pinning so much hope on these, what you could call like the big players at the table, how they're going to help him, the Narn out or not. That the power dynamic there is obviously like the Earth and Minbari are bigger players at the table than the Narn are. So whether that's really true or not, or is it just survivor's guilt or whatnot, is another discussion I would say. But yeah, he just, every scene he was in, I was just like, wow, this guy is just killing it. I just could not get over the extra depth that they were adding to the G'Kar character. And that last scene, I gotta admit, I was not I didn't know quite how to read it. Like you said it, like he laughed and cried, but was he laughing because he got them to help, or was he crying because he didn't get enough help, or was he doing both? And I think that's art at its best, is that it's up to you to interpret that. How, I always come back to why is the Mona Lisa smiling argument. And if you knew the reason, then that piece of art wouldn't be as provocative as it is today. And that's a moment there that you can read into it in several ways. And I just thought that was a really nice touch again. That was another cherry on the top moment. So yeah, it was just, the more I think about it, the more as we're talking about it, it's getting me even more emotional about his acting in this episode. I thought he just killed it. Amazing performance.
Yeah, everything you said. There are four scenes in particular that really kind of brought him home to me in this episode. One is the scene with Sheridan. And I think their acting together, Bruce Boxleitner's and his, is really great. You know, they have kind of that chemistry in the fact that they, you know, Sheridan wants to help him but feels powerless. He feels powerless because of all this that is happening to his race, and they're showing it in their frustration. At least that's what I take from that. And the scene with Delenn, where he's kind of begging her for help, and she is telling him what she needs for him to know, but she's also not saying that she doesn't have power anymore. So that's kind of what I take from them as well, that they're both hiding things from each other, but she doesn't want to say, I don't want to help you. I don't think that's her feeling either. I think she really does want to help, but you know, she doesn't know how to do it. Then the scene where he is walking away from the confrontation he had, where he was poisoned and it was just a scratch. You know, it shows that he's trying to assert himself in front of his, I don't know, subjects on Belmont 5. I don't know what to call them. I mean, the people that he is kind of the head of, whatever. So he's trying to...
His people is what they call it.
Okay, his people. Yeah. He's trying to look strong and trying to look like they didn't hurt him, but he's hurt. I mean, he could die from that, but he's putting on that brave face. And again, that shows like the vulnerability in the character, but also the acting ability of the actor, where we can see what he's doing without him having to explain everything. And then the crying at the end, it gets me. You know, it's almost like when you are overwhelmed by a sad emotion and you start like hysterically laughing about it because there's just no other emotion you have. And then that turns into that just anguished crying, and it's seamless between the two. There's no break between the laughing and the crying. It just slowly turns into that. It's like he's just 1000% overwhelmed by the situation. He can't control anything, and that's just the only reaction he can have in that moment. He's alone. He's finally letting himself feel everything. Everything's kind of piling on him at that moment, and we just see everything he's feeling in that moment. The acting overall in this episode is amazing, but him, wow, is all I can say. Andreas Katsulas is, I mean, it shows more depth than we ever saw from him in other things where he's just, you know, the bad guy.
Yeah.
In this, he's not the best guy ever, but in this case, he is trying to do the right thing at every turn. And it's being subverted, and he feels like the bad guy's winning. And so he's really showing that vulnerability while still trying to be strong. And to me, that is, I mean, perfection. It's just perfection in this episode.
Yeah, I do love his performance, and I agree with you, Lou, and you too, Karen. But the idea of like, you can read whatever you want in there. It's the absurdity of, you know, going back to part of his actions. If he had been better at building alliances, would things have gone better? If he had worked better, had not been so, you know, anti-Centauri in the past, would all this going in there, and you know, he put on a brave front and then being injured, truly And just a wonderful job that your heart just goes out to Jakar and his situation. The same way, I'll be candid, my heart goes out to Londo. I realize that these are choices he made himself. And Veer warned him. Veer said one day, and Londo didn't want to hear it. And now then it's the cliche of, right? Oh, who's loving me just for me and not for my money, right? This is all of a sudden everyone wants him. Everyone is going to him, giving him gifts and tokens and bribes because he has this power. And he's even reached the point where, he tells Veer, just put it with the others. And he just wants, and I think the scene where Garibaldi and he goes, I just want you to be happy for me and me to be happy for you. And he stays all the way till the end, hoping, just desperate that Garibaldi said he might come back and await that. So, Karen, let's start with you. Londo's storyline, this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the way they're making me feel about Franklin. They're making me feel about Londo. I have wavering feelings about both of those characters, but I tend to like the Londo character more. And part of me feels really bad for him, but again, I have a hard time with that. Even as much as they built up how likable his character was and how much I really adored that character, it's just been so fast to me how I've turned on him. And I think that it's by design, definitely. And I guess I'm starting to feel like maybe he gets it a little bit, that he understands what Veer was saying now, that there are definitely consequences that come from these actions that aren't just out there on your planet. He's helping his planet. He feels like, that'll be a war that's out there. Maybe I'll get a little better status around here. But he actually, literally says in this episode, I was just hoping to be better, to be more, to rise in the ranks. But now I've got all these people coming to me, asking me for favors, giving me things. We saw that with the guy coming to him and putting under the table, I might could get you illegal stuff. And then that whole, it does break my heart that he and Garibaldi have this falling out, because that was one of the more joyful pairings, I thought, where Garibaldi kind of leaned on him because he had to be a recovering alcoholic. And so, he used Londo, I think, sometimes to get that feeling back. And they're just both miserable with what's happening. And I do think Garibaldi finds it difficult to part ways with Londo, but he feels like he has to. Because how can you like someone and continue to ally yourself with someone when they're doing such terrible things? And it's not that he has compassion for the Narn. He has the same amount of disdain for the Narn that he's always had, but he just can't get on board with this. He doesn't like what Londo's doing, so he finds it a flaw in his character. So it's heartbreaking. I get it. I do feel a little sorry for him, but again, he made his own bed. He was told several times, if you do this, there's no going back. You have to take the consequences. And he's feeling it now. So.
Lou?
I'm paraphrasing, but woe to those who do not pay heed to history, for they are doomed to repeat the same mistakes over again. And that's what's happening to Londo. So my amount of compassion for him is pretty low because, as Karen just mentioned, he's been told several times that you go down this path, you're going to find out that having is not the same as wanting. And he's learning that, he's finding that out. So, and I have to repeat, I can't really feel sorry for him because it's not like he had no guidance in this path that he's chosen. He was told many, many times, I mean, almost to the point of irritation on my part, that if you do this, it's not going to go well for you, and you're going to end up being cursed. And the platitudes just come to mind. Like Karen said, you've made your bed, now you've got to lie in it. That scene was tough to watch, where he was waiting for Garibaldi, but that it all goes to what he's done to himself. So it's an interesting dynamic in that you can a lot of times, if they had played the show straight, where Londo was a bad guy right off the top, you wouldn't even be having these second thoughts about, should I feel sorry for this guy or not? Because in the first season, he was a very likable character. Now, and this is good storytelling, because it makes you re-examine or question, your own feelings and perceptions of things. So I really appreciate it from that perspective, but my sympathy for him is really low. I'm sorry, I'm just not going there with this character. I do think what's interesting is, from Garibaldi's perspective, because he's like basically part of two secret organizations, this is the top guy. Like, why would he even? I mean, it's good to, you want to make the other person feel like con men, they always want to make the other person feel like they're in control of the situation, and they're making this decision that the con man wants them to make so that they can, achieve their goals. So from that perspective, I can see that playing out here. But being close to Londo is a goldmine for Garibaldi. Like, he's going to find out things that he could not find out as easily any other way. So I think it's a good strategic move for him to remain friends with Garibaldi, or with Londo. So that'll be interesting to see if they explore that aspect of the storyline with Garibaldi and Londo in terms of intelligence gathering. So yeah, it's the actor playing Londo is doing a good job with the role, but I can't. My empathy for that character is pretty low, if not totally shut off. So, and there's no redemptive actions that he can take. There's just too much blood on his hands. As I mentioned, like the Darth Vader storyline, one good act will not undo all this damage that he's done. So, like this little thing where he didn't press charges with this one Centurion that was killed, it was more a ploy on his part to try to get favor from Sheridan and Garibaldi than it was to mete out justice. And this is the difference between his character again and G'Kar. G'Kar would make the tough choice, which we until this season wouldn't have believed. But this is where we sit right now.
Karen, thoughts?
Yeah, agreed. I'd like to think that I think you're right, that Garibaldi really should take advantage of his friendship. I think this is a knee-jerk reaction on his part, that he just cannot be around him right now. And I would love to see that he exploits that. I would love to see that. I think that it would be invaluable for him to have Londo in his pocket. But, Garibaldi has feelings, and they're very strong. And it's hard for him to hide them. And his job doesn't make him hide his feelings. His job is about meting out justice, getting the station under control. And so he uses his emotions to drive that. And with all this stuff that's going on the station between the Narn and the Centauri and making his job harder, he is not having it. And he's right at his last string there. So I do think that this is kind of I just can't deal with you right now kind of emotion happening. But I would love to see that. That's a great point, Lou. I would love to see him kind of, I mean, Londo would take him back immediately. I mean, Londo needs real friends. And then to see what the ramifications would be if he finds out that Garibaldi is using him. That would be super interesting as well.
I did feel sorry for Londo at the end. Even
You got
though
a big heart, Jesse.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, that's true. And I do think that, and I do think he was doing this because I do love the way he played that. Oh, this one. Oh, he was nothing but trouble. We knew he would come to no good end. No one will care. And he is doing this as a favor to Garibaldi and Sheridan, because he is smart enough to know, that blank is going to hit the fan if they have to do this trial. And they in this case, they did a tell, not show when setting that up. And, he does them that favor.
Yeah, but isn't he doing it for himself as well? Because now he won't have to get called on the carpet over it?
Could be.
I mean, I would like to say he's doing it for a lot of different reasons, and not all of them are altruistic. In fact, maybe only one of them is altruistic. So I know you really love Londo. I did really love Londo. I think Peter Jurassic is amazing as Londo.
Yep.
But wow, I'm finding it hard to think about how he could pull this back. Yeah. And like Lou, I mean, we have a lot of seasons to go.
Sure.
So, but it's, if I think about it, we're equating it to Russia versus Ukraine, right? At least right now. I can't think of anything that Putin could do to make himself look sympathetic at all. So, that part of this is like, you subjugated the Narn. You're taking them as prisoners, turning them into slaves, killing civilians, children, women, just, people doing, living their life. It's really hard for me to understand what he could do to be sympathetic again.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. Sorry for jumping in, Jesse.
No, please.
If this show is doing these kind of arcs where they make you take a character that you like and then knock him down, the way Londo's story arc is going, like the only appeasement that would have an emotional value for me as a viewer would be if he had a story arc that took him to the end of this conflict and something terrible was going to happen and he was the only one could prevent this from happening, but the cost of that was like his life. That would be a story arc that I could get behind and say, okay, because in fiction, if you do something bad, usually the only way that you redeem yourself, and I put that in quotes, is by making a sacrifice that may cost you your life. So if that's a kind of arc they're setting up for Londo, I'll be very interested to see that play out. And I'm sitting right now and I'm just like, in this episode, I was just waiting for that council meeting scene where Londo and Jakar were going to be in the same room. I don't know if we're ever going to get a scene like that anymore, because these two guys are, I just don't see how. Well, I guess Jakar would be able to control himself based on what we've seen in this episode. But those scenes now are going to be so charged with subtext every time those two face each other that I'm really looking forward to see how that's going to play out as well.
Yeah, those are all great, interesting points. And I think part of this is the actor's ability to play that. That despite his actions, once again, the cheese stands alone. He's all by himself, just desperate. And then Garibaldi comes because almost grudgingly, like, you did do us a solid, and they have the Shirley Temple delivered. and this, it's good to have friends, even maybe just short term.
Mhm.
And it is this, and I do think it's the actor, right? Because
Right.
if we look at the character itself, like, no, I have no empathy for you whatsoever. You've made your bed, now you lie in it.
Yeah, I
To
just want to clarify that distinction, what you just made. Like the
Yeah,
acting from him, I'm enjoying the heck out of what he's doing. The character, that's another
yeah,
story.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, and I get that, and it's like, wow, you know, what are we trying to do? And it, I just thought it was a really, where both of them are fighting this, just, and once again, I guess because of his Londo's situation, and I do have a soft heart, that left me feeling a little sorry for him. Um, and it is going to be interesting going forward, right? Because he now has a lot of power, and Jakar has very little power. And I do look forward to seeing them back in uh, the chamber, the council chamber, and seeing what the dynamics are going to be.
Hmm.
Any final thoughts before we get to ratings? And then I have a couple questions for you.
Sure. I want to also mention Natoth and Veer. I think that they had that while their parts were very small in this episode, you could really see how they are acting differently towards the person they're assisting. Veer has become very businesslike. He's no longer bowing and scraping, and I think that shows a lot about his character. And then Natoth, who is Jakar's ride or die, she is there with him. She will fight with him no matter what. She's not going to hold back. She's helping him get, seen for this grave injury he suffered. She holds him up. She's literally holding him up. And, we see Veer literally just change overnight because he doesn't agree with what's happening. And it's almost like, yeah, hey, sir, here's this. He doesn't have that same subservient attitude that he had before. So even down to the tiniest of characters, and even Jeff Conway in this episode, who kind of broke up a fight. I mean, the smallest of characters, even if they're only getting one scene, they're really bringing it home. I am appreciating the acting in this episode. I mean, to the nth degree. Every single person in this episode was stellar, in my opinion.
That's a great point, Karen. I never even
Yeah.
thought of that. I think like what you said with Veer and Natoth, Veer's growing more distance and Natoth is growing closer, like as you said. And another thing, like for Jakar, like the guy can kick ass too. Like, when he's not all just words. He puts it out there. Like he put himself physically in the action to quell the rebellion that his people were planning to do on the station. So I really appreciate that. The other item that I wanted to mention, and it has a great point, and it also has one of those, oh, here's pragmatic Lou again coming up with these, why is this planet nobody visiting this planet moments. But the conversation between Sheridan and Delenn when they're talking about helping Jakar, Sheridan says a great line, and I'm paraphrasing, but he tells her that there might be a risk, but it's up to them to make up for what the governments think is not in their best interest. I just love that line. But then, unfortunately, it leads to my dramatic nitpick is they said they have all this extra food that they can send to the Narn, and I'm going, well, you've got all those people in that down below. Why weren't you sending the food to them in the first place? So
no, that's a valid.
So yeah,
Harry
one of those
Chapin.
things. Yep.
Harry Chapin used to talk about that this country makes enough food to feed the world overall, but we just don't. For various reasons, we don't do it. So
we pay farmers to destroy their crops.
Yeah,
that really happens in America.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it burns me
Yeah.
that things like that happen. And I feel like that's kind of what they're illustrating here, that,
Yeah.
their own people, and they actually, bring it up in this episode. So we should be able to draw that conclusion. They have all this food that's stockpiled. Why are they not helping their own people? And that's, it's a big argument. So what a great point.
Yeah, a really good point. So, 2 or 3 episodes ago, Lou specifically said, you guys had said that season 2 steps it up, but I haven't seen it yet. Are you feeling a little bit better about season 2 after these last couple episodes?
After this episode, even though I don't know enough to know how it fits in the overall story arc, but at some point I'm sure this current war is somehow going to be linked to the bigger war, I assume. But this is like, there's been 1 or 2 really good episodes, but there's been a lot of what I would call the standalone episodes that I don't really see how they're going to play into the bigger thing. But this episode and the one where they were on the Centauri homeworld, and when the ambassador came to Babylon 5, those two, that episode and this one are the standouts so far. So
good.
That's good. And I would just want to see more of this instead of the one-offs. But I realize in this type of TV show, especially in the era, one-offs were still quite common. So,
and last week we had the Lynn Grey Council, and we find out that
that's true as well.
Is doing that. So right.
Yeah, All Alone in the Night, and the other one I would say The Coming of Shadows. That's the one with the Centauri homeworld. Right. There's been 3 or 4 episodes this season that really bring that feeling of a series that is well worth watching.
Good. And
I think in the first season there were a few of those as well, but not to this degree. This is really making an impression on me. Okay. And that's, we're only at episode 12, which is halfway through the season-ish. And if it continues on this arc of just getting better and better, then I'm so happy. Okay. I really am very happy about season 2.
Good. All right. Do we want to let's do ratings. Karen?
Yeah, I'm gonna give this 9 little wind chimes. Wind chimes. Thank you. 9 wind chimes.
All right, Lou.
Yeah, before we recorded, I was sitting more than 8, but as we started talking about the episode and how good Jakar's character was this episode, I'm going to bump it up to a 9 as well, and I guess I'll go 9 old style versus new style.
Oh, nice. Well, I'm right there with you. I'm going to give it 9 Shirley Temples. It is, I think, a really like him, dislike him. Jakar and Londo bring it as characters this episode, and then you just gotta love Claudia Christian having, her, as you said, her Harry Met Sally moment, and there also, it is some funny things like, well, what now? Well, you don't call me, like she threw in a lot of cliches about dating in the modern world, so that's great. All right. Karen, we have feedback from one of our favorite emailers, don't we?
Texas Emlishock, yes.
Yes.
She writes, have we determined he or she?
The they address that in the next email that I can't send you because I don't want to
spoil the episode.
They are ahead of their feedback.
Okay.
So I didn't want this to I will send it to you after this episode.
Okay, so I'll just say Texas.
Okay.
Texas says, hey there, 3 bags full. You come here often? Yes, I do. I love that opening little, it's not a haiku, but that out of the way, on with the feedback. In this episode, we have what some have described as the Prime Directive on steroids. I disagree. This is not the Prime Directive on steroids. This is the Prime Directive. I give you the episode Homeward, where Picard is willing to sit in orbit and watch a planet's atmosphere evaporate, killing the primitive culture that lives there while giving a speech about honoring the Prime Directive despite the difficulties. As you might guess, I am not really a fan of the Prime Directive. Now on to the Lumati. They're kind of amusing in that silly way heavily caricatured characters are. I like that Ivanova essentially proved their much touted superiority to be a sham when she pulls this completely obvious scam on Karel Mirzan, and he falls for it hook, line, and sinker. Talk knows what's going on. Just listen to that chuckle of his. The beauty of this is even if he ever does find out the truth about sex human style, he will never admit that he got bamboozled like that. It would be a mark of inferiority. Now on to the real meat. The war is having personal consequences for both Londo and G'Kar. Now we know why the Narns kept going for bluster and sneak attacks on targets they thought the Centauri wouldn't bother to retaliate against them for. The war has barely started, and already his people are on their back foot, and G'Kar is having to try and drum up support from other races. All the mustache twirling and agitating from the first season are starting to catch up with him, as he's finding few friends he can turn to, and those he has are not in positions to give him what he wants. This is where I really started to come around on G'Kar. Either the part where he asks Delenn if she wants him to beg, or when he is cry laughing at the end. I think he's weeping because he knows his people have started a fight they can't win, and laughing because it's also absurd. I also think he laughs just to keep himself from collapsing on the floor and wailing. Londo has the opposite problem. He suddenly has dozens of new friends, but the friends he thought he had suddenly don't want to be around him anymore. Garibaldi is as blunt as you'd expect from him when he flat out says people probably are afraid of Londo these days. Still, it's hard not to feel sorry for him despite everything when he's sitting alone at the bar. And it's nice to see that he's willing to help out his good and dear friend enough so they can share a drink together. And it seems as though this will be the last time. That's going to be an ongoing thing, Londo's actions isolating him from those around him. Anyway, that's all for this now. Until next time, this is the Texas and LaShock signing off.
That was a lot.
Nicely done. Any thoughts?
A lot of great points there. And
Yeah.
It pretty well echoed our discussion.
Yeah,
Yep.
really nice. Yes, thank you very much. Lou, how about on our YouTube page? Any thoughts?
Texas is not just satisfied with sending emails; they're also commenting on the YouTube as well.
Yay.
So they're talking about what we just talked about, like because you asked us what we thought of the season, and it's a balance between the individual stories and the overall arc. And their opinion is Babylon 5 is the best one at it. And I think that might be because it was still in that era of episodic TV. So it had to stick to a format that was familiar to audiences. A lot of modern shows go to straight serialization, often with one episode leading directly into the next. 24, for example. There's one other show I watched that strikes that balance as well, Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I'm sorry, I should mention that this is in reference to All Alone in the Night. Just for context as to these comments. Sinclair has a good reason for always wanting to jump into the action from a character perspective. He was looking for a glorious death. That's interesting. I guess that's maybe inadvertent foreshadowing. I don't know. We'll have to see. The purpose of the abduction storyline was to put Sheridan into a state where Kosh could finally reach him. Oh, okay. I think that's a pretty valid reason. It's not the most elegant way to do that, but if that's what the purpose of that was, then so be it. And I just love the little touch of sarcasm when Lanier says the council is very wise. Yeah, Lanier's a good dude. He's the kung fu of the series, that's for sure.
Yes.
Khan 67. He says, Turin is the emperor. I don't believe he was actually named in Coming of Shadows, but was retroactively named Emperor Turan, which is actually the actor's real first name, Churhan Bey. Oh, very good. Graham says, I immediately noticed how much longer this discussion is versus the last one for Gropos. So much here to say. Okay. This episode is very much a new turning point, a beginning for much of what is to come in the second half of the season. It's got a somewhat good cheesy old 90s sci-fi trope of the alien abduction bits, very X-Files, and pitting different races against each other, very 60s Star Trek. But that familiar sci-fi trope sets up something much more substantial in the allowing of Kosh to reach out to Sheridan all alone in the night is huge. And of course, Delenn is also far more alone now, too, cut loose from the Great Council. Excellent point. And all that, and a beginning conspiracy to save Earth from Clark. Wow. Very good. Christian, Franklin successfully ran an underground railroad under their very noses. That's a really useful skill set and a group of connections if you're planning a conspiracy. And he's the main character.
Yes.
Very good. And I guess we must have hit a nerve because we said, why is Franklin part of this group? And if he says Franklin is part of the command staff, not just a doctor. And it reminds me of that Kirk shows the classified Genesis data to both Spock and McCoy in Wrath of Khan. But we argued or discussed that in that series, McCoy's position as a command officer was much better positioned than with Franklin. So that's why we had that discussion to begin with.
And they also kind of set the expectation that McCoy was an old friend of Kirk's.
Right.
That he was a personal confidant, that you so that's why I'm saying that, he is considered senior staff. So that's why I'm going to keep going to that. Franklin is senior staff, that's why he's there. But I think it's a valid nitpick.
Mm-hmm. And I would argue too that in the Star Trek universe, it was McCoy's job to be constantly aware of the captain's mental and physical condition. So if he didn't know why Kirk was making decisions, then he would call him in and say, hey, I want to do an evaluation because what you're doing right now doesn't make any sense. So that's, from a function point of view, I think that series established very well why McCoy was doing what he was doing. Whereas in Babylon 5, Franklin's just kind of running off and doing his old thing all the time. And he doesn't even really talk to anybody unless he gets in trouble. So there's that. Virtual Robot Radio. Oh, I love that name. It makes sense we never hear from the Strebe again. They were probing this sector of space for a weak race to conquer. Their ship was destroyed by a massive armada of warships. They went on to raid elsewhere. And he also goes to say that I should mention the Strebe do appear again in the novel Casting Shadows. Are you familiar with that novel, Jesse?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I know at the point, I think I mentioned last time, there was a whole series of novels right after they did a Psychor trilogy, a Centauri trilogy, and I'm trying to think the others. The Centauri was the one by Peter David, which was my favorite. So I'll have to see. Yeah.
All right. And if he says, so you're going to hurry up and start season 3 next week, right? Well, we'll get there. We're about 11 episodes, and is that halfway now? Is this half? Is there 22 episodes? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
And then there's if he brings up the point of, I don't think we ever see what the people in Minbar want or think, and then there's a discussion about whether this is true or not. And if anybody wants to read that, they can do that.
And he put the people in quotes, which I think is important, like the common man is what he's talking about.
Yeah. And then if he has given the military too much power is always a mistake. War or no war, there must be civilian oversight or they will abuse that power. Before you know it, they will start wars to stay in power and expand that power. Sound familiar?
Yes,
it does. Yeah,
yes, it does.
And I do think that's one of the reasons Delenn is so upset is that Valen set the council with 3 in the warrior caste, 3 in the religious caste, 3 in the worker caste, so that no one would have an overall, and I know that there are historians who say that our founding fathers of the U.S. never thought we would be a two political
Two-party system.
party system. They thought that there would be multiple parties, therefore they would not be this. There would always be this need for compromise, and that just didn't work out that way. So yeah, good. Very nice. This was, as always, a lot of fun. Next week we will be talking Hunter Prey. And so we get a fugitive with secret Earth Force data relating to President Santiago's death takes refuge on Babylon 5. Listeners, I know that B5 has gone off HBO Max. There was a lot of online discussion about that. And JMS said that he's not surprised. He said that HBO Max went into an agreement 2 years ago to have the series. And he said so it ended. It has nothing to do with the new reboot. He says that just happens routinely, that Warner Brothers will refresh this and then they'll come back. So do not read anything into this. So I did have to pull out my DVD sets. It has been very convenient just to go to HBO Max and pull it up.
We're so lazy nowadays.
Yeah, I know. Yes, it is. It is. I actually had to go into a closet where I stored them, found them, and I pulled all 6 sets out.
Do you actually have a DVD player still?
Yes, I do have a DVD player, and I can play it on my computer.
Oh well, yeah, the computer thing. Yeah.
Yes, but no,
I had to put mine on a drive and plug it into my TV in order to watch it on the actual TV, which I want to do. I don't want to sit at my computer all the time. I'm so angry at HBO Max, not just for this, but they're doing a lot of really shady there's no other way to say that than,
well, and I do think if you guys will pardon me a little bit, there is an influx of kind of political things that Netflix is canceling a lot of shows, HBO Max is canceling a lot of shows. Our feel, at least me as a fan, was, streaming services will save us, right? That because there are new series, they bring them on, and now then it is the same as networks where you have shows that you feel like have done really well, that are very creative, and yet it wasn't enough eyeballs on it, so they're not keeping it, and it makes it a little sad.
That's why they call it show business and not show friends.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Paper Girls was something I was very sad that we didn't get a second season.
Same.
Either one watched that.
That was good. I liked it. It was kind of, Stranger Things light.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. All right. If someone wants to give us feedback, Lou, how can they?
Look to YouTube for Lou's Reviews, where you'll find our Babylon 5 podcasts, as well as Stephen King and the writers, and our JKL Media one-offs. And we just finished up the English, and those episodes will probably go up next week. And after that, we're doing a comic book that Karen recommended, and that is coming after the English. On Twitter, you can find me at LW Sitzma or the S King podcast.
Karen?
Yeah, just for future reference, I did recommend Identity Crisis, which we'll be discussing, and I'm assuming there will be some differing opinions about it. And just like if you guys want to look into like some of the backstory, it was also very controversial. So it'd be nice if you guys, like the listeners, read it as well. It's something I feel is worth reading, but there were a lot of differing opinions about it at the time. So anyway, I am at Oliveria on the Twitter machine, and my blog is aliesstuff.com.
And our email address is jklb5podcast@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW, but pre-warned, as we are counting down to Bruce Springsteen's tour. There will be lots of Bruce Springsteen on my Twitter. I am going to be able to see him 4 times within 2 weeks.
Wow.
So I am very excited about that. And
I hope he doesn't get a restraining order against you.
Let's hope not.
I would assume not.
Yes.
Are you going to interview people at the concerts for your podcast?
Yes, I will have my phone,
cool.
and
Guerrilla.
I will be
Guerrilla
doing that.
style. Yeah.
So we'll be doing comments.
You gotta get a T-shirt made up for your podcast, so when you're at the concert,
Yes.
everybody say, "Oh, I'll have to check that out."
I do. I have
Make
business cards. And,
Make a T-shirt that says "Set Listing Bruce 1,000 episodes," like in really big font.
Yes.
So you hope that one of his security guards sees it and goes, "Hey, Bruce,
Yes.
look at this guy.
Yeah.
You ought to go talk to him."
Yes, exactly.
Although we do know that Bruce Springsteen is going to be a guest on your 1,000th episode already, which
From
right?
your mouth to God's ear. Yes. Yes. So so very cool. All right. We'll see you next week. Hunter Prey. Be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And scene.